the world. So please, say a few greetings, who you are and where you are. We love to hear from you and have your comments. So I'm starting the presentation now. We have a very, very special event today, and I'm very excited about this. It's a first for us, but of course, it's not only a first for us, it's a first for India as well, to have a contemporary sculpture park at a historic house. And I'd like to speak for about 15 minutes to give an introduction about the topic. As you know, we have also a very active Facebook group, Centre for Historic Houses of India, and we already started a debate before the event. And we've had some very enthusiastic responses and some critical responses. And I'd like to address this and really spend the time to ask the question of how do we revive historic houses, and how can contemporary art contribute to historic houses, but also how does actually contemporary art benefit from the context of a historic house. So let me just put these here. So how does modern art contribute to the revival of historic buildings? How does the context of a historic building impact exhibition practice? And I'm talking especially of kind of the heavy impact of modern art on contemporary art and the idea of the white box. So in India, of course, with the very strong focus on surface ornamentation, how does it work with contemporary art? Is this Western? Or is there something that is maybe universal and just contemporary? Maybe Peter can address some of these points. And I know you already have, a bit afraid of all of these heavy and important and big questions that we are asking, because you really want to talk about the park and the individual artwork. But we would be grateful if you could address some of these important questions. So to what extent is contemporary art a Western phenomenon shaped by modernism?
Would you like me to talk about that now?
Yes, you can address some of these points right now. Yes.
Well, I mean, first of all, the audience may not know that I'm basically a gallerist, and I have a gallery in New Delhi called Nature Morte, which started in 1997. So I've been running a commercial gallery in New Delhi for 23 years. We had a branch in Calcutta for 3 years, and we had a branch in Berlin for 5 years because of finances. Basically, now we just still have one branch in Delhi. But, I came to live in India in 1992 for 1 year. I didn't know really what I was doing. I wanted to spend more time in India. And I had a gallery in New York. So I came to India and I stayed, for a number of reasons. Basically, I liked India. I thought the culture was fascinating on every possible level. But I also discovered artists working here that I was very, very excited by what they were doing in the mid-90s. So I opened the gallery in 97. So when you ask me, is contemporary art a Western phenomenon, that's just ridiculous, because 90% of my programming in 23 years in Delhi has been Indian artists making contemporary art. One reason I stayed here and opened a gallery was because I met and found artists that I was very excited by what they were making, and I thought it was world class. I thought it was highly sophisticated. It was dealing with issues that were relevant to the art worlds of London, Paris, New York, the Western world. It was also a time when Asia and globalization of the art world was happening. So there were many things coming together. I mean, I didn't have a master plan. I really didn't have. I was in the right place at the right time, and I chose to stay here. Also because the art world, the serious art world of India is conducted mostly in English. So, despite the difficulties of working in India, running a business in India, the language, I didn't have a language problem, and I could access that. And all the artists I work with have basically all studied in English medium schools. Most of them have studied in Baroda or JJ College in Bombay or Shanti Niketan, and then many go off to do postgraduate studies, say with the INLAC scholarships, programs that are available to Indian artists, say in the UK or Paris, or perhaps a Fulbright in the United States. So I hope that answers that question. Do you want me to start explaining?
I would like to ask you, what do you find exclusively Indian or uniquely Indian about the contemporary arts world here?
Well, I'm not looking for anything exclusively Indian. Do you go to Germany and ask for the artist to be exclusively German? You know, I mean, you know, look, we can talk about great German artists such as Gerhard Richter and Anselm Kiefer and George Bassitz. They're very much rooted in their German culture, but then they're also talking an international global language of contemporary postmodern art. And that's what I found here in India in the 90s. I was very interested because I sort of, I came of age in the New York art world of the 80s, which had a lot to do with appropriation, feminist art, media-derived art, looking at how the media was affecting art production and art production changed. So then when I came to India in the 90s, I was fascinated to find Indian artists looking at the same issues, but in their own country, right? Look at the changes that happened in the media, the economic certainly, but also the media landscape of India in the 90s was revolutionary, right? And then also the commercial commodities sector. And artists were responding to that with skill sets and knowledge that they had learned about from my generation of artists in the 80s, or an older generation of artists in the 80s. So for me, it was very exciting to come to the other side of the world and find artists grappling with many of the same issues, but in a very different context. So again,
let's move on and
they had one foot on both
talk about the relationship between contemporary art and heritage sites or historic, contexts. So.
Well, that just comes, as you said, I mean, I'm bored with the white box. I mean, I have a white box gallery in Delhi that I do 10 to 11 shows in every year. So the white box is a facility that we use. Sometimes we paint it colors. Sometimes the artists develop, wallpapers or exhibition designs, installation programs to get out of the white box in the gallery. But I was very excited that, India, one of the wonderful things about India is the diversity of architecture and decorative art styles in this country. So to have the opportunity to do that. I worked a bit in Jaipur in around like 2000 to 2002 with Faith Singh and her Viras Festival. She had started in Jaipur, which was a citywide pan arts festival, looking at crafts, music, traditional arts. And I volunteered for that because they wanted somebody to bring in contemporary art. And so that was what I did for that Viras Festival. And again, we did use some white box gallery spaces in some, exhibition halls that are in Jaipur, but we also had access to some temples and other sorts of heritage buildings. And artists are very excited about those kind of things. Even artists are a little bored with the white box, and not all artists, of course, but many artists are very excited about the site specificity and playing off the history of buildings and being inspired by that to do things they wouldn't normally do for a white box gallery space.
Right. I find that the whole idea of patronage, of course, is closely associated with historic buildings, especially palaces, complex architectural structures, because the families who lived there were patrons of the arts, of crafts, etc. And this seems to link with the kind of contemporary art scene now, where again, historic houses or organizations dealing with historic houses can be patrons of artists and craftsmen. And it's this kind of spirit that brings it together. But of course, how do we deal with the stewardship on the one hand, and innovation on the other hand, or continuity of art and design? Of course, in England and in other countries, there are many attempts, also sponsored and supported by the government, to support artists in the context of historic houses. I've got a number of images here from Chatsworth, and I've chosen some of the historic houses which are the most visited houses in the United Kingdom. And here, from a dog exhibition looking at dogs from different centuries to various other sculptures in the garden. So there is a very close link. But there is also the kind of contemporary art that normally the heritage kind of audience would have problems with, which is the kind of controversial, provocative kind of installation art. This is, for instance, Blenheim Palace, again, one of the most visited country houses in England. And I'm talking about the Catalan exhibition here, you know, with Hitler kneeling in the chapel, the kind of dead horse. You know, if you don't know anything about contemporary art and you hear about this menagerie of dead animals and kind of liquid or chemicals, you would think of the hoax kind of art, like elephant poop, the unmade bed, the light is on and off. To someone who likes kind of traditional culture and you know, architecture, this is difficult kind of to swallow. And you know, the funny kind of aspect of this exhibition was one of the biggest art heists in the 20th century, namely this kind of golden loo that was actually stolen during that time. Apparently the artist had tried to sell it to President Trump and he didn't want to buy it. And I want to move on from there and have a very short video about this support from one of the biggest preservation organizations in Europe. It's the National Trust in the UK.
Trust New Art is a 3-year partnership programme between the Arts Council England and the National Trust to bring contemporary art into the historic properties and also the landscape owned and managed by the National Trust.
It struck me that this is just such a really wonderful place for contemporary art. The mansion is a work of art in its own right. We've got a fantastic collection, a fantastic art collection. What we're providing is the fantastic location. We're like a gallery for the people of Shropshire. It was a really fascinating thing to do. It was really fascinating for our visitors, and it provoked a whole range of reactions.
It's just been really surprising going into different rooms, and I didn't know when we first walked in and we saw the one in the foyer. It just thought that was a one-off, but then it's sort of like went into different rooms.
It's been a sensation, really a sensation. It's been lovely.
So this pushes us to work in new and more interesting and innovative ways. We recognise that we need to reach more people, and that actually bringing places to life is a big part of that strategy, and that contemporary art can do a lot for us in that area.
So there's this, and we really hope that we have more such collaborations in India. So the National Trust is responsible for about 500 historic sites, and they have this new Trust New Art program together with the Arts Council, as we saw, with over 200 projects and over 60 monuments, and with an audience of over 3 million. So I'd like to ask you a little bit also about, you know, the audience in India, how they responded, and can you do that? How many people actually visited the culture, the sculpture park? Do we have any information on this, Peter?
Well, the sculpture park is located in Nahargarh Fort, which is along the ridge, the same ridge that the Amber Fort is on. Back towards the city of Jaipur. The fort itself dates from about the mid-1700s, but in the late 19th century, in a period of about 10 years, the Maharaja built a palace up there. So there is and it's really just the tail end. Really, it's the last decade of the 19th century when this palace is built. And for all practical purposes, it's sort of a proto-modernist building because it's actually a small apartment building. And apparently from the research that we've done, the Maharaja built it for the women that were in his harem that were not Brahmins. So the harem that was all Brahmins were kept in the city palace down in the city itself. But the lower caste women were put up there. So it was a pleasure palace. It was a party pavilion. It must have been wild, right? But we started discussions with the government of Rajasthan because our project came in a sequence of events. Really, there's a woman in Delhi named Malavika Singh, and she spearheaded the creation of Bikaner House in Delhi. If you know, Bikaner House is one of the Maharaja's palaces that was built on the Maidan, the oval, in Delhi at the capital. It's in between Jaipur House and across the oval from Hyderabad House. That, after 1947, had been turned into Rajasthan government offices, and it became derelict and just full of cubby holes and things like that. So Malavika Singh convinced Vasundhara Raje, who was the chief minister of Rajasthan at the time, to move the offices elsewhere and renovate the building, which they did a beautiful job of, and they turned it into a cultural center. So it has a gallery space which can be rented, lecture hall. There's a wonderful garden in the back for concerts and dance events, and so all that. And it's become really a hub, one of Delhi's most active cultural hubs. And because of the success of that, Vasundhara Raje said, so now what can we do in Jaipur itself? And that team then rejuvenated the Jawahar Kala Kendra, which is a beautiful contemporary arts center, both visual arts and performing arts, designed by Charles Correa, opened in around 1993 or 4, which also wasn't being used to its full capacity or effectiveness. So they brought in a team and funded that and rejuvenated that. And the next step after that was they took an old building also dating from about 1860, which was in the Pink City of Jaipur, built to be the College of Art by the British. That was also laying empty, so they renovated that building and turned it into the Museum for the Traditional Arts, stone carving, crafts, textiles, jewelry, things like that, and made what they called the Museum of Living Legacies. So through some social connections, I was able to then tell them I'd always wanted this idea of putting large-scale outdoor sculpture into heritage forts, specifically. We looked at Amber Fort, and it was too big and too rambling, actually, to suit what we wanted to do. So they said, look at Nahargarh. And we're not really using Nahargarh Fort. We're using specifically the Madhavendra Palace within Nahargarh Fort. And that worked very well to our benefits because A, it was already open to the public as a monument, functioning as a monument. So it had electricity, it had security, and it had, a minimum of a staff in there. And as I said, it's kind of a building that has both interior and exterior spaces. So it gave us much more flexibility, many more options for what we could do. So that's how this all started. And then the rest was sort of, the government, we were very lucky. Vasundhara Raje's government really gave us carte blanche. We raised the money. So then I teamed up with a woman named Aparajita Jain, who is Indian, and she had started a foundation called the Sat Arts Foundation. And when she started that in about, I believe, 2010, that was using money from her family and her friends, specifically to do contemporary art projects in India. And what they were doing mostly was bringing national curators, contemporary art curators to India and sponsoring their trip and showing them the whole contemporary side of the Indian art ecosystem, studio visits, museums, so they could see what was here and hopefully continue to be engaged with Indian art. So with Aparajita then came on and she acted as the liaison between us to do the sculpture park and the Rajasthan government, and then really reaching out to corporates for their CSR. Now CSR is corporate social responsibility. So every corporation in India that has a certain amount of profits, over 100 crore or something like that a year, has to give a certain amount of that to social responsibility programming. And culture does come involved with that. So she was able to raise the money for us to do the show. It costs any visitor to the fort, it costs them, I believe, 30 or 40 rupees to enter the fort. And they always had access then to see the Madhavendra Palace. But now they see the Madhavendra Palace full of contemporary sculpture is what we've been doing.
And so do we know how many people have visited?
Oh, even before we started, we're still at, during the season, which is say November to March, you're looking at 5,000 people a day are coming. And so we're still at those numbers a bit, 5 to 5, maybe we've seen a little bit of it since we started the sculpture park, but really, I would say of that 5,000 people a day, 90% are not coming for the sculpture park. Particularly, they're coming to see the fort and then they're coming in. And then they're encountering the sculpture park. But again, I would say a good 80 to 90% of our visitors are people that have never visited certainly a museum of contemporary art or a gallery. So they literally don't know what they're looking at. So we have started education programs working with local colleges. So the students come in and act as docents that can walk people around if they want to explain works. We also have signage for each work that explains the work briefly. That's in English and in Hindi. And I'm very happy to say that there's large crowds around the Hindi language signs because people want to know what is this thing I'm looking at, you know. It's given us security issues because people don't know that it's art and it shouldn't be touched. It's interesting to watch people, but I think a lot of people think that it's almost like playground equipment because a lot of large scale things. People pick their kids up to stand on the things. So as I said, we have guards, we've had to educate the guards and things like that. But in that way, I mean, we've had wonderful press, but I would say that the press has been mostly from the international arts press has been very excited what we do. You'll see the pictures are very luscious. So we've had good coverage from like Apollo magazine, both contemporary and more traditional arts press internationally. Not so much, I would say, I wish there was more press from Hindi language and regional language publications and newspapers. I think that's going to take more outreach.
Yes, interesting. Yes,
and go to the pictures now. I mean, the pictures are all worth thousands of words, right? And people.
And Architectural Digest and so on. Yes, it was really.
We've got Architectural Digest,
yes.
El Decor, lots of things.
Yeah.
Because I said the world is ready for more interesting combinations, just as these combinations.
Yes.
Palace and things
absolutely,
like that.
Absolutely.
For those of us in the art world, we don't see any difference between ancient Greek sculptures and contemporary art. To us, it's all art. And a big trend in the art world in general, in the museum world, has been to create trans-historical exhibitions, grouping things together simply because they were all made at the same time at the same place. Start bringing works of art together from, vastly different contexts and times in which they're made, but bring them together to shed new light on things and to create new narratives,
Right, exactly. So I have two images here put together, and I saw this installation here, which reminded me of a chandelier that I'd seen at Waddesdon Manor, Lord Rothschild's house, now belonging to the National Trust and leased to the Rothschild family, and this chandelier by Ingo Maurer. So I wanted to show these two images to juxtapose this, how you actually engage the contemporary art with the context, and not to have a provocation, but actually to be inspired by the context to create something new and to have a kind of continuity, because of course, even palaces, they are not static and they shouldn't be static, but they continue to evolve. So we need to have something now. So a new contribution, a continuation, not something that is kind of stifled only, in a kind of under a glass. And so, let me just see. Of course, Lord Rothschild is a great patron of the arts. He has a wonderful collection ranging from cabinet of curiosity pieces, Renaissance pieces, to 18th century pieces, furniture, Marie Antoinette, paintings, etc. And always, of course, a great patron of contemporary art, and also with the architecture, the Flint House that he built. And I kind of really like these, the chairs, the round chairs that you can see here in detail and again. So I wanted to show this again, this juxtaposition between the contemporary art that is, where you don't have a boundary anymore between art and craft and kind of object of utility. It's kind of both, and that I find extremely inspiring. So it's something that you actually live with, and you still admire. So I love that spirit, that is almost like a cabinet of curiosity, spirit of awe and wonder that continues. And this is the kind of approach I find, as someone who deals with historic houses, extremely inspiring. The work by Michael Eden, who actually uses and is really engaging with a historic object and creates something new that is based on a new reading of the old, whether it's this kind of Wedgwood terrain in a new kind of shape, or something inspired by Seth porcelain, or the other collection of the Waddesdon Manor. And someone who also kind of doesn't create the sense of provocation, but creates a sense of very emotional response, I think, is the work by Edmund de Waal. From his writings and the beautiful account of an object, the Netsuke, which he uses to tell the family history, objects that kind of travel from Vienna to Japan and then back to him. And here his exhibition at the Frick Collection, again another historic house, or the Biennale, his exhibition of Psalm, in engaging with the kind of Jewish heritage and the wonderful memory, the library memory that he created. This is the kind of combination I find between contemporary art and historic interiors that work very well, and I think engage both the audience without kind of creating the kind of controversy. So from this engagement with historic objects to the creation of new objects, I wanted to go over to Axel Verwoerd, whose work I also find very inspiring. And again, it's a blend between arts, interiors, and living towards a timelessness. He is very inspired by Wabi Sabi, this kind of simplicity, which I find is a very contemporary spirit in a way. The Wall Street Journal once shaped the term rough loose. And I think this is very much a kind of a very good description of contemporary interiors that engage with the old, but we do not longer need the kind of status. They do not need to be status symbols. We don't have monarchs anymore that need to kind of impose their power and so on. So we are kind of really inspired by a kind of simplicity, and we have been shaped by modernism, but we have also moved on. Maybe we are more critical of the machine. I think we cannot have this admiration anymore for the machine. So we are more interested in other questions such as sustainability, nature. And I think Axel Verwoerd, he really brings this together, and he beautifully blends ancient objects from Hahn vases to contemporary art, to again here this installation in the Palazzo Fortuny. And I wanted to show you, this is his castle near Antwerp. And here, for instance, he created a porcelain cabinet, but not so exuberant, not so much gold, not so many mirrors, but a simpler version. And sometimes being inspired not only by a piece, but by a principle of design, and reading and kind of creating something new, which creates a timelessness, which I find extremely appealing. So basically, I'm coming to the end, but this leading over now to Peter. And these are the questions that I would like to know. Like, what has been the impact of the sculpture park? Did the sculpture park result in new audiences? What was the audience response? And how did the historic context impact both the artist and the exhibition practice? And what will be the future of the sculpture park? So I'm leading it over to you. Hold on, Sinma will share the presentation. So, thank you, Sima. Now you can take over from there.
Thank you. Just to quickly answer one of those questions, what has the impact been? I mean, it's hard to judge the impact, but I can say that, if we have 5,000 people a day coming through here, if we can even get, 0.5% of each of those people every day turning into someone who's going to be more curious about contemporary art, who's going to actually search out a museum or an art gallery because of their experience of stumbling upon the sculpture park, then I think that's that's fantastic. That's all we hope to do. Just open the door to people who are curious and exposing people to things they've never seen before. Here, just to start, is a picture of what's currently there right now at the Madhavendra Palace. And this is a site-specific piece made by the British sculptor Richard Long, who's very well known for working with stones, usually found on or near the site, and doing pieces. So we invited Richard to come. He used the local red sandstone of the Jaipur area and created this piece called River of Stones, which let's move on so we can get a better picture of that. Anyway, here's just some pictures of the Nahargarh Fort itself, as I said, which dates from around 1760. This is the step dweller, Baoli, that's in there next. It's not much of a, as forts go, it's not much of a fort. It's actually just rambling walls and things like that. This is a subsection of the Madhavendra Palace, which, as I said, also dates from the very end of the 19th century. So it's quite separate. Can we have the next picture? Next. Okay, now to bring us to the sculpture park itself, the site and all the permissions with the government of Rajasthan were only agreed upon in March of 2017. And we were asked by Vasundhara Raje at that point to open the first edition on December 12th. Is it December 12th, I think, or 10th, 2017, because that was going to be the 4th anniversary of her being the chief minister. So we had to do this quite quickly. This was just when we got the green light. So all we have is the site. We haven't even raised any money for it yet. So we had to do this quickly, and I didn't have time, or we didn't have even the finances to bring artists up there. So really the first edition had to be works that I knew already existed, that were in collections or in artist studios that I knew we could borrow. I had to do this quickly, but we wanted to stick clear with sculpture. It's all sculpture, but sculpture takes on many, many different forms, and any material possible now. But we were very specific to not bring in any wall-mounted paintings or photographs or even videos or anything like that. So that was really the parameters for the first edition, just to explore sculpture in all its diversity. But we did want to bring in international artists. We could have easily done it with all Indian artists. There's certainly enough, but we wanted to expand our audience and our support base also by bringing in international artists. So I think about a third of our first edition, I think we had 21 artists, about 35 sculptures, and about a third, I think 9 of those 21 artists were non-Indian. So here you see a shot of the courtyard. So here, this is the courtyard of the Madhavendra Palace, the sort of central. And if you see, there's doors. So there are, it's almost like a little it's almost like Melrose Place. It's almost like a small apartment complex, because what the Maharaja did was he built like an apartment complex, and each of the wives, the Maharanis, had their own apartments, with each apartment being identical, so they couldn't fight. So each apartment has this door that opens to the courtyard, and it has a ground floor and it has a first floor, and it had kitchens, bathrooms, servants' quarters, and we'll see those go. But then at the end, across from the entrance, because now we're sort of standing at the entrance coming into the palace, this is your first view of it. That door at the end would be a sort of triple width apartment, both on the ground floor and the first floor, and that was the Maharaja himself apartment, with the best views looking out over the city of Jaipur itself. So we can go to the next. And now I'm just going to walk you through the sculptures that we placed there for the first edition. And this is pretty much the order and how the viewer would come upon them. This is a sculpture by the Indian Pakistani artist Huma Baba, who has been based in New York for about 30 years or something, and has recently become quite a star in the international art world. This is a bronze sculpture which measures about 12 feet high, a single piece which we brought over from New York and put on a base. So that would be the first sculpture that people encounter. Next. I'm going to have to go fast. Opposite that is a sculpture by the well-known Indian Delhi-based artist Subodh Gupta, who's become very well known for casting found objects that have a certain sociological weight to him. So this is his sculpture using the ambassador car. This is an ambassador car that has been taken apart, and the parts have been cast entirely in aluminum and put back together again. And I love this work because obviously, you know, the ambassador car is something unfortunately that's disappearing from India, but was a real symbol of the government of India. So now to park this inside this palace, which is like, you know, 150 years old, it's almost like different shifts of history coming together. Next, it's the actual size. This is a sculpture by the artists that work together, Turkwell and Tagra. It's two guys that work together. And this is a pair of it's this fiberglass sculpture in two parts, but it's really made to be a selfie point where the viewer goes in between these wings, and there's a place where they put their hands so they can have their photographs taken and sort of be turned into a superhero with these giant wings. But they also wanted to make it look like they're almost like ancient artifacts. They look like giant pieces of granite that have been carved, and it's something that probably could have been, you know, come off of Konark or an ancient temple in India. Next. And opposite that was a bronze by Bharti Kher, another Delhi artist. This is a figurative sculpture. Now, this is about 12 feet high, so unfortunately we don't have people in these pictures to give you a sense of scale. But these are all very large pieces which we brought into the courtyard, requiring, you know, forklifts and trucks and all that to set up. And it's very unusual. I guess these pictures were taken very early in the morning before anybody came in, because usually there's just huge crowds around everything. Next. And sort of sequestered away in a corner is this work by American artist Matthew Day Jackson. And this, as you see, is a sort of figure that's been turned on a lathe and turned into a spinning. It's solid polished stainless steel, and it rotates on a base and spins. And it's wonderful the way it kind of reflects the wall painting of the palace itself and kind of blends in. Something kind of looking very futuristic and sort of sci-fi. But then I think it looks very appropriate in this. I don't know, but that maybe other people would find it. I love the schism. I love the sort of schizophrenia of putting these things together. As you see, the palace is heavily decorated with wall painting, which are original. The designs are original. They're very strange in terms of stylistic, because you can trace them to traditional sort of Rajasthani patterning, but there is some sort of Edwardian European influence going on. The government has been restoring them, I say, with a very light, delicate touch, which is very nice, over the past few years. That restoration of the wall paintings is almost completed. We had to work around it a bit the first year, but as you can see, they're doing it with a light touch, very not heavy-handed, using the original colors. That was part of the appeal of the place also. Next. So now you're moving into that apartment at the end, which was for the Maharaja himself. And see, each apartment now has its own interior courtyard with pillars going to a sort of veranda, and then beyond that, which would have been the sort of living room or something. So this is the basic plan of each of the apartments. The painting changes colors. The motifs and the patterns are pretty much the same throughout. There's a little bit of variation, but the colors can change radically. So these are two pieces by an artist from Karnataka, Ellen Tallur, two stone pieces that are facing each other in that courtyard. Next. And then these are two side rooms. This was probably a pantry off that courtyard you just saw. So on either side of those were these sort of pantry rooms where we also put the sculptures. This is another sculpture by Ellen Tallur. So I brought in multiple pieces by single artists, but kept them in proximity to each other so they would talk and the viewer could encounter all the works by Ellen Tallur at the same time. And as I said, we did have signage identifying everything with short descriptions in both English and Hindi. This is a piece called Obituary, which is a log which people were hammered coins into, and it actually sort of functions as an incense burner. And if we can go to the next one, this would be in the opposite room. So we go crossing back. Next picture, please. This is the opposite. No, can we go back? Next. Okay, let's hold on this. There you can see on the right-hand side one of our information panels. But this is another stone piece by Talor in the room opposite. So when the viewer is encountering their works, you're seeing the other works. They're all talking to each other, and you're getting a sense of the artist's overall practice because we've put 4 works together. Next picture we can go to. Now with the first edition, as I said, I had to pick pre-existing things. None of the artists even came until the opening. We didn't have the time or the money to bring the artists there to see the sites. They were all pleasantly surprised, of course, and very excited by it. But for the first edition, my one idea I was thinking about curatorially was thinking about the idea that this had been a palace. This had been where people lived. So I wanted to bring a sense of life back into it, or maybe the life of the ghosts back into it. So I did go towards a lot of works which were dealing with furniture, furnishings, or domestic objects or decorative arts in some way. So that was the sort of theme of the first one. Now this was, as I said, the palace of the Maharaja himself. So in this room, in this apartment, I put bronzes by the very well-known French artist Armand. And this is a suite of works called The Day After. These are bronzes. What he did is he took traditional classical French furniture, burnt it, and then stopped the burning while the pieces, before they completely fell apart, and then had them cast in bronze. So I think there was about 7 elements to the suite altogether. And here you see in the foreground the coffee table, the sofa, and then through the doors, the armoire. Next picture. And so here's another site. This is the same arrangement of furniture there, these all being bronze pieces. On the left, you see a single chair, and then next photo, a mirror. I think we have another picture of this. Okay. Now in another apartment, now what we're doing is we're walking through the apartments on the ground floor. So in a certain way, each apartment has one artist. So it kind of gives, you know, it gives one space to one artist. We tried to pick big pieces that, again, this is by the Swiss sculptor Hans Josephson. This is a very large piece. It is cast brass with a very rough patina on it. And again, this is a single piece of brass that maybe is about 12 feet long, maybe about a little more than 3 meters long. So these are very, very large pieces that sort of occupied and commanded the space. And then with something like this, we wanted to play off the roughness, the almost natural sort of quality of the sculptured stuff. You see, this is a reclining figure with, again, the ornate patterning, but then it positioned also to line up with the architecture. So I think it hopefully activates the lines of the architecture, the lines of the painting. Next. This was one site-specific piece, the Bombay artist Reena Sani Kalat. She uses a lot stamps, the stamps, you know, the rubber stamps with the wooden handles that are used in offices. She's used those a lot in many different types of work. She likes the way how they signify bureaucracy and the Indian government. She had done a number of pieces like this before, so we asked her to make one. And this is a spider web made out of things. So now you're in one of these apartments in that courtyard, which you see is open to the sky, and she created this this spider web of stamp pads. Now again, this is a large space. This is almost 20 feet in diameter, this piece. So it's very commanding. And I think for the viewers, it was, for the people that don't know, I mean, for them to come in and, yes, okay, sculpture, we know as figurative statuary, it sits on a pedestal. But this is a very different type of sculpture. The viewer comes in and has to look up, and it's totally suspended about a good 6 feet above the viewer's head, and you're seeing the sky through it. So a very, very different form. This piece was made specifically for this site. Next. This is an artist from California, Yvonne Holloway. I had seen these and I love these. What he does is he takes branches, and simple branches and twigs and sticks, casts them in bronze, welds them together into a geometric rectilinear form, and then sort of emphasizes the unnaturalness of it by painting each section a different color. So what it becomes is this strange hybrid of a natural form, but also then sort of forced into a sort of very geometric human model. This piece was very popular at the fort, and I think you see why, because there's a certain correspondence going on with the wall painting. I mean, he has created what he calls climbing branch. It's a completely unnatural tree. But like the wall paintings of the wall, those are floral motifs on the wall, but they bear no resemblance to real naturalistic paintings of flowers. They are just as stylized, just as you know, fabricated as by a human as the Yvonne Holloway sculpture is too. Next. And then to jump again to a very different type of sculpture, Stephen Cox is a British artist who works a lot in Tamil Nadu and works with stone and traditional stone carvers in Tamil Nadu to create these pieces that are contemporary but have a very strong feeling of ancient Greek forms or ancient, even African forms. Next. An artist based in Delhi, Asim Waqif, uses found materials to make these. He studied architecture, so these are almost like architectural models that have been exploded. So in this case, this is a piece that's made from bamboo, which he uses a lot, laminated photographs, different materials, to create a sort of mobile that hangs again in the space, and I think with the lighting activates the space, bringing in, you see there's one language on the walls of geometry outlined in a certain way, and then his piece comes in and disrupts that with a different geometry that is much more chaotic with the piece and also the lighting with the shadows itself. Next. And another piece by the same artist, Asim Waqif, made out of a tree stump, again, that's sort of that is then wrapped in these laminated photographs of destroyed architecture. This piece, again, this also measures about 12 to 15 feet high. It's hanging, free hanging in the room, so it could actually spin around. And people, you know, for me, sculpture is, of course, all about 3 dimensions, moving around it, encountering in space, and having it change in the space. So that was, for me, very exciting about putting this kind of work into this kind of building, because the building changes as you move through it. I mean, the paintings change as you see them from different angles. So the two, I mean, you know, to just have to look at this in 2-dimensional slides is not, is certainly just, you know, nowhere near the actual experience of it. Next. We're still, as I said, just walking around the ground floor of the first edition. So you see how much space there is and how many pieces we were able to exhibit. This is an artist from Visakhapatnam, very well known in India, Ravindra Reddy, who's known for doing these large monumental heads. Another piece that measures almost 12 feet high. Referencing classical miniature painting, especially from Rajasthan. And this is a sculpture called Migrant. So she's got a bundle on her head and she's moving. And again, now think of what was, we opened the show in 2017 when there was, you know, a lot of, all the migrants were leaving Syria and moving into Europe. So migration was a very big subject at the time. Next. Another piece on the ground floor, Jitish Kalat, an artist from Bombay. This is a bronze piece, again, maybe about 6 feet high, freestanding. And this uses, it is a blown up, it's the kerosene stove that pavement dwellers use in Bombay to make chapatis for dinner. You put the kerosene into the bottom, and then so it gives you a flame in the top. You're able to put your pan or something. He blew that up into large scale using that form, and then covered it with decorative arts motifs that he actually found and replicated and cast from the facade of the Victoria Terminus in Bombay. So another hybridized, semi-Indian, semi-European decorative arts language from another part of India brought into a similar sort of hybrid here in the palace in Rajasthan. Next. We've now gone upstairs. So now we are on the top, on the first floor. So you see a very different type of room now. The grating you see on the left was just so to keep pigeons and monkeys out of the room so that the paintings wouldn't be restored. Here you can see now how they have restored the paintings in the rooms with a very elegant light touch. It doesn't look new at all. They did a very beautiful job. And in this room, I put bronze sculptures by the American artist James Brown, again, because they're using furniture, European furniture, classical European furniture, cast in bronze with modernist references. And another sort of, and then this palace was very much a hybrid, again, between the Indian and the European styles. The next picture shows us the other James Brown architectural bronzes that were cited there, these being finials from buildings on top. Next. In another space, we took bronzes by the Indian artist Mrinalini Mukherjee, who makes bronzes. But these are individual bronzes, not from, what she did was she found natural objects such as leaves. These are like banana leaves and pods, different forms from nature. She would cast those in bronze and also mold wax into different forms and cast that in bronze and then weld them together into what are effectively collages. So we had one room with two, or there's another piece of hers, this piece called Bird, placed in this room. So two of her works speaking together. Next. In another room I put, you saw Turkwal and Tagra, the two guys from Delhi, you saw their big fiberglass wings in the courtyard. This is a set of sculptural furniture that they had done for another project and they had. So we brought this together, semi-functional, looking at design objects, but again also I think sort of playing off of Art Deco references. So feeling very appropriate in this building. Next. A New York sculptor named Arlene Sheckett worked for many years. She's actually a student of Tibetan Buddhism. So for many years, her work was was actually creating Buddha-like forms out of plaster and different materials. So what I did is I borrowed 7 of these blobby Buddhas. We brought them from New York, and then we sourced these old wooden tables from Jaipur itself to create bases, to create this suite of sculptures. I mean, for me, being there, I enjoy, again, just Mimi, as you were saying, this to create this this sort of cycle between architecture, decorative arts, and contemporary art. For me, that's very exciting. For me, sourcing these kind of very old wooden tables that are very plebeian. The people that were the people working at the palace thought, what are they doing with this old furniture? But for us, it's very beautiful. It has wonderful patinas on the wood. It has the sense of history. And to use that as the base for the contemporary arts within this envelope is a very exciting juxtaposition. Next picture, another woman artist. She is from Chennai, Benita Percial, who does this type of figurative sculpture. And her figures are made from agarbatti. She has developed a sort of paste, a glue that is able to use the agarbatti with some clay and some mud, and she's able to cast figurative elements into these ensembles. So this is a piece which was conceived as 3 figures. Let them own their land, it's called. It's sort of an homage. She thinks of it as a monument to the farmers of India. And you have these busts, which in a sense, are very classical types of busts from ancient Rome, Greece, and even up to the Renaissance, done in a very contemporary, very experimental media. And then again, to be able to frame them in this sort of mise en scène is very exciting for both me and the artist. Next. Upstairs in a room, we put 2 works together. This Jatish Kalat, you saw downstairs, his stove, his bronze stove. This is a piece he made using cast bamboo. You can't really see it here, but there are, again, details from the Victoria terminus of animals and things, and making it into what looks like a very common bamboo ladder, the type of ladder that the workers bring up there to do on the lights and things like that. So again, playing with the idea of the ready-made, the found object, and again, a sculpture that is bringing some life into the palace, or even the contemporary life of the palace, the workers. Next slide. In the same room as that piece was this piece by Subodh Gupta, who did the ambassador car in the courtyard. This is using a found cast iron stove on the bottom as the base or the pedestal of a sculpture. And then most of his work, what he's known for, is using new or old bartons, pots and pans that he read. So these are all actual found pots and pans that he sources in his hometown in Bihar. They've been used by families over the years to cook hundreds, maybe thousands of meals, and he puts them together again into this sort of monolith, again, a monument to the common man of India. Next. I like that juxtaposition of taking these things from the very common, the working class, and bringing them into the palace. An artist from Jaipur himself, Prashant Pandey, we had a group of 3 works. So this is, it's hard to see, but this is a disc made of chips of white marble. It's suspended. So at night it was, and it's called Peace, but it almost looks like a moon. And you see the placement's very precise to get it framed by the architecture and the paintings. And now next we'll see the 2 pieces of his that flanked that piece on either side. So again, when the viewer is standing in front of that moon-like piece, they turn to the left and right and see these. This is a sort of coffin-shaped object standing up. So perhaps the figure, the body could be in it standing up. And it's covered with a skin of clothing, white clothing that has been dipped in plaster. So again, it's figurative, but not. It's geometric, it's modernist, but it's not. And next slide would show you the sculpture exactly opposite that. Again, all 3 works seen by the viewer at the same time. And this is a cube of about 3 feet in each dimension on a steel stand. And this cube has been made out of lime paste, a certain lime paste that's been chewed and spit up and then compressed into this cube. So this piece changes over time and the artist is okay with that. Slowly, when it was brand new, it didn't have these cracks and fissures in it. So it's a piece that will change over time. And again, juxtaposing perhaps one type of decorative line work on the walls with another type of patterning that's brought about by chance, by time, by nature. Next. Another work by, this is a work by a Delhi sculptor, Anita Dubey, who works also with, these are roots which she found and put together and covers with a skin of black velvet. And it's suspended. It looks sort of alien. It looks like it could come from another world. But again, it's coming from nature and relating to the natural motifs painted on the wall. Next. And a very minimal piece by a French artist from Paris, Guillaume Panchal. And these are very simply 2 pieces of found green marble that he chose because of the very painterly quality of the veins in the surface and very precisely placed on the floor, again, to activate the wall painting and the geometry in a new way. Next. Vibhagal Hotra is a Delhi-based artist who uses a lot of gungrus, the tiny little bells that are made into bracelets or ankle bracelets for the traditional dancers of Rajasthan to beat out to make the beat while they're dancing. So this is thousands and thousands of gungrus which have been patinaed in different colors and made into a carpet. It almost looks like an oil spill or something. And this was wonderful. This is something she made for an art fair many years ago, still had in her studio, and it really fit very perfectly into this room of the palace. Next. A Bombay artist, Manish Nai, works with found objects and transforms them also. And this is simply, again, these are staffs, wooden sticks that are maybe also measure maybe 16 feet high each. And he packs them with found clothing that is packed around them and made solid with a resin. So this was a piece, again, that had a very different, as the viewer moved around it, it activated the space. It was standing from floor to ceiling. And in many ways, taking an idea of color and patterning from painting and turning it into sculpture. Next. But you can see now that we have a certain real similarity to all the rooms and the painting. There's not that much variety, but it works well for our purposes. And on the roof, which we had a great problem because there was a lot of monkeys on the roof and they love to destroy things. But a friend in Delhi, Vikram Goyal, who makes furniture, but very sculptural furniture in brass and steel, only uses metal. He was able to come to the fort and make a series of these 100-petal lotuses, which he calls them. They're columns that he had made in other times for other projects, but these are columns that measure, again, about 15 feet high. There were 12 of them made for these 12 platforms on the roof, so each one's the same, and it relates to, you know, traditional tantric imagery, used in architecture, turning it into something contemporary. And those dishes at the top were used for fires. So for nighttime events, we were able to have flames coming out of them, and it was very dramatic. So we can go to the next picture and we go to edition 2. Now with edition 2, we were able to start the planning for edition 2 the day after edition 1 opened, which meant I had a lot more time. I had a full year. Our plan from the beginning always was that we would put up shows for a year, and we would have them go from December 10th to November 1st of the next year, giving ourselves November basically to take everything out and bring everything new in and start a new section. So that's been the plan, and we've been able to do it twice. So we were able in December of 2017 start immediately planning what we're going to do in December 2018, which meant we could start, we also then had money raised and all that, which meant we could look at doing things that were much more made for the palace itself. And, you know, for the first one, we spent a ton of money just on shipping. So this time it gave us an opportunity to say, okay, instead of spending all that money on just shipping the objects there, let's bring the artists there to also work with local materials, local craftspeople, make something that's even more of the site and of Jaipur and Rajasthan itself. And we started with Richard Long. You'd already seen this piece. Here's the whole view. Richard Long is extremely well known. Has done work like this all over the world in museums all over the world. So it was a great thrill for me and honor to be able to, I didn't know Richard. I got in touch with him by email. His wife was in India. She got to see the palace before we put the first edition into it. But Richard loves India and he's worked in India before. So he was very excited by the proposition. We told him we will give him the entire courtyard. And he said, okay. We said we have to find local stones. He said, I want to use the red sandstone that is native to the Aravalli Hills. And we sourced blocks for him. He had, you know, he had done drawings. He pretty much knew what he wanted to do. He came 2 weeks before the opening, oversaw the chopping up of these. We bought 7 blocks of sandstone for him. Each one's either the size of a small car. And then he chopped them up into sort of cobblestone size shapes. And then we dragged them all up to the top of the mountain, and he created this piece called River of Stones, amazingly quickly, actually. I think we have one more picture of this. There you see it from when the audience comes in. It's very sturdy. Kids can jump on it. They're big rocks, so you have to give it a big, you know, you can't really move them, but they get a little out of whack, and we put them back in order. But it's 860 rocks altogether, and it's about a 30-meter length on the piece itself. So that is still there to this day, because we had to delay everything also because of COVID and weren't able to do the 3rd edition yet. Next, so that you see is a very different way to approach the courtyard. Now, this year, as I said, almost all of the artists were able to come to Jaipur to look at the sites, to choose what part of the palace they wanted to work with. So Akia Anzi is actually an Israeli sculptor who actually has lived in India for many years and actually studied in Jaipur. He now lives in Delhi. So we also were able to use more of the palace this year. So these are sort of corner wings on one end, which we didn't even use. We didn't even use for the first year. And we were able to bring together a lot of pieces that Akia had made and shown in Delhi previously in galleries and things. So we almost were able to do a small survey show. And if we go through Akia's pictures, you'll see these are a number of pieces that he had made earlier. Next picture. using found objects, relating art. These are all wire, these are brass rods that are put into a base that sort of simulate a wheat field. But all of these were pieces that he had made for other shows, which he had in his studio, and he was able to reconfigure them for the site. Next picture. You can't really see this one, but all the way down there at the end is a piece of white marble with a red top that says Makum Place, like the kind of mile marker you see on the highways of India. So again, it's almost like a small solo show we were able to do for Akiya, bringing together. Next picture is also Akiya. In this one, he uses, you'll just see a hanging lamp that looks like it's made these drips of oil, which are on the floor. Next, and again, the artist was able to choose the space, and this is a piece using workers' boots that have been covered with plaster. Next. Next. Okay, so that was, so you see we had about, I think, 6 of Akiya's pieces all together. So it's almost like a small, as much work as you would have in a gallery show. The corresponding other side of this wing, this other corner space, which we hadn't used in the first edition, Bijoy Jain, the architect from Bombay, Studio Mumbai, brought together a number of objects of different sizes, different materials, and was able to place them in the space. I think this is the only picture we have, but you see how he also played off of the architecture. This in the middle was a sort of stupa, sort of mound, completely constructed from very small fired bricks that he constructed there. So again, what I like about it is confusing the viewer. What is art? What was there? I mean, for the people that have never come to the palace before, it can be very confusing for them. Next. The Bijoy Jain was also as many rooms as Akiya's, but I don't think we have more pictures of that. We have this sculpture, a figurative sculpture made of stainless steel by the Bangladeshi artist Mahbub Rahman. So this is a sort of strange sort of bull figure standing on a base. Next. This is a sculpture by the well-known, no longer alive, British artist Lynn Chadwick. We worked with a gallery that represents the estate in Berlin, and they paid the shipping. So that was wonderful. Now this was now against that previous sculpture, the Mahbub Rahman. So if you were right there looking at this sculpture, which is sort of figurative, sort of alien, this again is a 12-foot high. I mean, our ceilings in this space from the floor up to that arch, that's about 15 feet. So it gives you a sense of the scale. So these are big pieces we brought in. And again, we're creating conversations between the pieces. So the viewer would just turn to the right, would see that Mahbub Rahman figure to their right, and the next picture to their left would be this sculpture. Next. This being a sculpture by a Korean artist, Michael Ju, which uses a geometric form in shiny stainless steel. So the same material as the Mahbub Rahman, opposite it, but in a completely different form. So you've got the same material with one is figurative, one is geometric abstraction on a mirrored base. Next. Opposite that in the courtyard of another, we're still on the ground floor. A piece site-specifically made by Chris Anstathakos, who is a Greek artist who lives part of the time in Canada. And she comes to India very often and is also very involved with Tibetan Buddhism and Tantric, very interested in Tantra. So this is a piece that she made with 5 mirrors. This again, now this table is 18 feet in diameter. We fabricated it for her in Jaipur. She brought a cloth over that she had done a print on it. It was stretched on a base. So it comes up, it almost looks like a big dining table. And then 4 colored mirrors, each, I think these are each 4 feet in diameter, are placed with dried feathers, again, reflecting the sky, much like the Renaissance. So using the light, using the space, reflecting the geometry of the wall painting. Next. And then the interior of the same apartment, you would encounter 2 pieces by a British artist who lives in Bombay, Mark Prime. This is a sculpture made of just steel rods, which are sort of suspended, looks like they're sort of in formation again. And next to that is the next slide, is this piece called Transience, using a very simple karai, but again, this is a big karai used for weddings, very simple objects sourced in Jaipur, filled with oil, and he created a rather complicated mechanism, which is completely hidden from sight. And there is, above on the ceiling, there is a thing that drops a droplet of water into this oil in the karai, I think once every 30 seconds, and it is amplified. He's got speakers hidden in there and a microphone in there, and it's amplified. So when that drop happens, it's like a boom. It's like boom. So it's really it's a sound piece as well, and really activates the whole space. And you'll hear it as you're entering the space. And this is one of these little side rooms, so the sculpture pulls you in from its sound. And this was extremely popular with the audience because it's almost surprising. It's very loud, so it almost shocks you. Next. And again, these are the artists themselves responding to the space, thinking of ways to activate the space. This is Ellen Talor was in the first edition, and now he was also in the second edition with this piece that uses a large log balanced on a granite Buddha head. Again, a very large work that requires mini cranes and things to come in. Next. I think also on the ground floor, well, now we're going to was a project done by an Israeli artist who also spent quite a bit of time in India. And she did an interesting project because she wanted to use these niches that are in all the rooms. I mean, there's these shelves with niches and they're painting, they're open. So she wanted to use those, turn those into proper vitrines, which you have in museums. And what she did is she went to all the guards that work in the palace, they're government employees, and she asked them to lend her objects that they own, that they have at home, that are valuable to them. They don't have to be valuable objects, but they have to be valuable to them. And she asked them, and she put them into these vitrines, and then we're using traditional techniques. We actually put a glass over the vitrine so the pieces could not be stolen, and turning it into a museum vitrine. So it was a wonderful thing of collaborating with the guards at the palace themselves and having their common objects from their homes turned into art objects within her installation. So she used a lot of these. We only have one picture, but she used many of these installations, many of the alcoves in a single apartment. With these objects. Next. And his name's being cut off. Shreyas Karle also did something similar opposite her project, bringing in common objects and common furniture to turn the museum, the alcoves more into like a more traditional museum vitrine space. Next. And he also worked with a local gardener. It didn't quite end up, but the plan was to create a garden to work with a horticulturist from the area. And but next photo, because that didn't really get finished, unfortunately. A woman sculptor from Delhi, Aisha Singh, and she makes sculpture out of band steel, which she then quotes traditional Indian architectural silhouettes. So what you're looking at is a piece of sculpture that is quite high, again, maybe 12 feet high by 10 feet wide, but it's just this very simple sort of half-inch band steel that has been shaped into this arch and welded, and now we suspended it with fishing wire. So the viewer could actually pass through it. So again, bringing in that conversation between the different architectural motifs. She had two pieces together, and the next photo, you see is placed into a side room. It had a little more dimension to it, but it activates the line work of the paintings in a very interesting way. That's Aisha Singh. Next. And again, she made those pieces specifically for these rooms. Reena Sanikalat, who was also in the first edition with the spider web of stamp pads. This is a piece that she made. She made a series of works sort of making these faux musical instruments based on 19th century musical instruments. And this is also, the viewer goes up and stands between these two horn shapes, and there is an audio component. and they get to hear a sound element.
Peter, we should come to the end soon. We are a little bit over time already, and
okay, we always go over. Okay, we're on the first floor. Okay, I'm just going to run through Asim Waqif. Just go through the pictures because now everyone gets the idea. Asim Waqif was there. Prashant Pandey, who you saw. We're now moving upstairs. Okay, this is a large sculpture of a pelvis bone. Next. Other piece by Prashant Pandey, glass slides. Manisha Parekh made stands, sculptural stands for bowls of herbs and spices. So there was a smell factor to her work, and it specifically placed them in what was the pantry. Next. She had 2 different rooms opposite each other. Next. Upstairs, Tanya Goyal works with found chunks of architecture and paints on them. This was her room upstairs. I'll go very fast. There's just one artist I want to talk a little bit. Okay, Tanya Goyal. Oh, this is wonderfully site-specific. This is 2 artists, Hamali Bhutta from Bombay and Bhavna Nagani, also from Bombay. What they did is they came to the fort, they took photographs of the fort, and then they had those photographs replicated into carpets, wool pile carpets by local carpet makers in Jaipur. And then we hung them as tapestries. So a very strange trompe-l'oeil sort of replicating of the space. Next. This is a number of works. You can go quickly through these pictures, but Harold Ankart is a Swiss artist who actually came and created a studio there on site and cast these cement sculptures on site, and they're still there, and then painted them referencing the colors of the walls. Next. Very abstract. Right. And now that Michel Francois that you showed before, these are bags, clear plastic bags filled with water and hung in the form of a sphere from a hook. We're lucky because there's lots of hooks in the ceiling that are very strong, and we use those. So again, he chose specifically, and you saw it through the window. So sort of creating this strange sort of water chandelier in the room. Next. And he did another piece, this with broken crockery hanging from the ceiling. Next. Achana Hande is an artist from Bangalore who created a sort of cinema space. She created this curtain using Rajasthani textiles and paintings and did projections inside the darkened space. Next. We're upstairs now. Savya Mahajan is an artist who works in ceramics. You see hanging there is a sort of snake-like thing with ceramics on tables. Next. And Sebastiano Mori is an Italian artist who works with very kitsch sort of common things. So he came to Jaipur and sourced objects to make these strange, almost 19th century little diorama pieces. And we had 3 of those, very 19th century, which played off the building. Next, I think that might be it. Yeah.
Great, thank you so much, Peter. This was a tour de force and really fascinating to have the curator speak about all of these objects. We've had a number of very interesting comments, and people felt that for the first time also they saw this kind of contemporary art in a historic context. So I'd like to give the audience a chance to make some comments. Naomi was one of the people who wanted to comment. You can unmute yourself, and I try to, or someone help me maybe from IT to unmute Naomi. Are you there?
Professor, I think she mentioned her device doesn't have a microphone or camera.
Doesn't have. Aha, doesn't have. Okay, right. Well, that's a bit difficult. Then who else was there? Abhishek, you had a few questions and comments. Would you like to say something? Abhishek, you can unmute yourself and then.
Ma'am, am I audible now?
Yes, great, yeah.
Ma'am, thank you very much for the opportunity, and it was definitely a great walkthrough. But if I might ask, how do you deal with the automation that is going on in modern heritage building, or you can say houses, and how much it impacts or hinders the work of an artist if he's trying to express himself?
That's up to the artist. I mean, many artists are very excited about the technological advances that are going on, and they use them as tools and make very technological work. Other artists, we've seen a big we've seen a reciprocal kind of, especially in the art world, of moving away. Many more artists are moving towards ceramics, craft techniques. They want to work with their hands. They don't want to sit on computers to make their works. I mean, you know, it's really up to the artist. Technology is just another tool, like acrylic paint changed a style of painting, right? So it's, you know, I mean, it's just up to the artist. It's, you know, I mean, for me, myself, I'm not particularly, you know, I love the internet and I love Instagram on my cell phone and all those sort of things. For me, I'm not so interested in technological work. I like work that gets more involved with materials, craftsmanship, interacting with spaces, things like that. But that's just my taste. I mean, for me, doing a project like this was very much about, you know, it's about experiencing the works in the space. It's a very special space. You know, you have to realize it takes you have to take a 20-minute drive just to get up there. So there's already that dedication. And then people are seeing this 19th century palace and then encountering these brand new works of art. I mean, that's for me the excitement, and it's a visceral, physical experience. Fine for technology. You know, we have a website, blah, blah, blah. It's not my thing, to tell you the truth.
Naomi is asking, would you like to comment on the Tagore family and art, including their influence on modern art? It's
not my subject. No, sorry. I'm involved with contemporary art. The Tagores are important, but I can't say anything about it. That's like, you know.
Well, one question, of course, now, what is the future now of the sculpture park?
Well, I mean, COVID has stuck a thing in it. We have a problem because the government changed in Rajasthan. So the day after we opened the second edition, the Vasundhara Raje, who gave us carte blanche and made this very, very easy for us, she was BJP and the Congress won. So the Congress government came in and isn't being very cooperative. They haven't, because we signed a 10-year MOU and our plan was to do 10 editions of this. So right now we're at a stalled period, but then also because of the COVID, we're at a whole lockdown. So our plan now is to, in the next month or two, we're going to take the works out simply because we have to return most of them to their owners. And then we hope we will install, because we worked on the third edition. I had lots of artists that were ready to come to Jaipur in May, but that couldn't happen. So we just have to wait and see now, and we hope that, so it is going to be empty. I mean, it will definitely be empty for maybe at least a year if we're able to go back in there and set up the third edition for the fall of 2021 is what we're hoping on, but we don't know at this point.
Do you feel that this has changed the art scene in India? Do you feel that others have been inspired to do similar things? Or?
Yes, I do think it's changed things. I do think, well, you know, one of the greatest things that of use is the Dr. Baudaji Lad Museum in Bombay, if you're aware of that, and the amazing job. That was built to be the Victoria and Albert Museum. And when I saw it for the first time in 1993, I mean, it was full of pigeons and pigeon poop, and it unbelievable. So Tani Mehta, who was the head of INTAC in Bombay, got the building, did an unbelievable job restoring the building and the collection, and then didn't want to stop there. So she has a very active contemporary art program happening there, where she invites artists to, again, bounce off of objects from the collection and work with that. So that's, I think, because it's in Bombay, certainly the audience is much greater. That's had a very big effect. And I think, I mean, she did that before we did this. So hopefully, yeah, it's going to get people to see more possibilities. But, you know, the problem also is, I mean, this would be much easier if I was working with a private owner. We're working with the government, and the government moves slowly. We were very fortunate that Vasundhara Raje was very enthusiastic and really gave us a green light and told everybody just to let us do whatever we wanted to do. So that's also another stumbling block as we move into the future, is working with the Congress government, who frankly they just don't really care about it.
Well, we have a number of privately owned palaces who are in touch with the Center for Historic Houses. At the top of my head, I can think of Bulgaria Palace, for instance, in Odisha. They have a residency program. And Ahilya Fort, I think they're also interested in working and collaborating with artists, scholars, and so on. So, I really hope that we can have more projects like this, and especially, the privately owned.
Well, I think, people, I mean, there's only so much I can do as an individual. We did have, because after the first edition and the good press, we got, glossy magazines and things. We did have offers from, we had offers. We weren't really able to follow up with them, but Hyderabad, corporates had seen it. So they were interested in doing something similar in their corporate headquarters, but still with. So, again, I mean, I'm not interested only in historical buildings. So hopefully, but, it's going to have to be other people doing it. I mean, I can't do all of it. I mean, I think people have to, see it and realize that they can do it. I must say, I'm always a little discouraged by the way Indians always just kind of say, no, we can't work with the government. I mean, we've got, the government controls a lot of the historical sites in this country. And if you're an Indian citizen and you're a taxpayer, come on, get your government to do more. Get them to be more involved with the cultural programming, organize. Yeah, I mean, it takes a lot of people, but do it, and get your government to do it. Hold your governments more responsible to do more of this kind of stuff.
And of course, the government is also supporting public-private, collaborations, especially with the Adopt a Monument scheme.
Yes, yeah. I mean, that was something that we were able to set up. So we have a model now with going to the corporates, getting the CSR budgets to use specifically for this project. So that's something that can be replicated, yes.
Right. So thank you again. Thank you very much for taking the time. Thank you for the fascinating talk and presentation. And next week, the announcement, we have the Lake Palace at Udaipur. And we have members of the royal family of Udaipur will be speaking, Lakshmi Raj, and also Professor Dipti Khera from New York will be talking about the origin of the Lake Palace paintings, 18th century paintings, and the area manager of the Taj Hotel Group that is currently managing the Taj Hotel. So I think this will be also another fascinating talk with these dimensions of management of a historic state, art historian, and family account and personal history. So please join us next week, every Friday evening at 8 p.m. We have our...
and can you use the same link? Send me the link.
I'll send you the link. Yes.
Okay, thank you, Mimi.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.